January 15, 2022 began like any other day in Tonga, until the sea exploded. In seconds, the volcano unleashed more energy than 100 Hiroshima bombs, launching a plume 58 kilometers high and smashing 15-meter waves into the islands. The word explosion hardly captures the scale. But this tsunami did something no one expected. It circled the entire planet. What force could shatter both science and lives in less than an hour? At the heart of the South Pacific, Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai was not a towering volcano, but a submerged caldera, its rim barely breaking the waves. On January 15, 2022, a chain of explosive events beneath the surface released energy on a scale rarely seen in recorded history. In less than an hour, the volcano unleashed between 4 and 18 megatons of TNT, comparable to detonating hundreds of Hiroshima bombs at once. The force of the eruption was so immense that it drove a mushroom cloud straight through the stratosphere, reaching an altitude of 58 kilometers. For comparison, most volcanic plumes never rise beyond 20 kilometers. Satellite sensors tracked the plume's ascent in real time, showing a column of steam, ash, and gas expanding outward in a perfect ring. The eruption injected an estimated 146 million tons of water vapor into the stratosphere, enough to fill 58,000 Olympic swimming pools, and sent shockwaves racing around the globe. This was not a simple volcanic outburst. The collapse of the island's rim allowed seawater to rush into the magma chamber, triggering a violent phreatomagmatic explosion. The sudden mixing of water and magma released a burst of energy that dwarfed previous eruptions from this site. Infrasound sensors and barometers as far away as Europe and the Americas recorded the pressure pulse, which circled the planet several times. The extraordinary height of the plume and the global reach of the shockwave were direct results of the energy released in those first minutes. This underwater blast was the largest atmospheric explosion ever measured by modern instruments, and it set the stage for the waves that followed. Within minutes of the eruption, the sea pulled back from Tonga's western shores. The exposed reefs and sandbanks signaled what was coming next. Waves as high as 15 meters crashed over the coastline, sweeping away buildings, vehicles, and entire stretches of road. On the island of Tofua, field teams later measured the run-up at nearly 22 meters, taller than a 6-story building. In Nuku'alofa, the capital, a wall of water surged through the streets, flooding homes and businesses. Eyewitnesses described a roaring noise like a jet engine, followed by a sudden darkness as ash fell from the sky. In the outer islands, the devastation was even more complete. On Mango Island, every house was destroyed. Families clung to trees or climbed onto rooftops as the waves kept coming. A composite account from survivors tells of chaos and confusion. They heard the sound of explosions, felt the ground trembling, and watched the sky turn black, and then the ocean rose with unstoppable force. Roads disappeared. Water tanks and crops were swept away. Some tried to save neighbors, others ran for higher ground. The human toll became clear only later. 6 lives were lost in Tonga that day: children, elders, and adults caught by the waves. More than 80% of the population was affected, left without homes, clean water, or power. The tsunami left behind a landscape of debris and silence as the first night fell, and communications with the outside world abruptly ended. The eruption did more than destroy homes and flood villages. It cut Tonga off from the world. The nation's only international fiber optic cable, buried beneath the sea, snapped just 37 kilometers from the main island. In an instant, nearly all internet and phone connections vanished. For 3 days, the outside world heard almost nothing from Tonga. Government officials, aid agencies, and families abroad waited in silence, unable to reach anyone for news of survivors or the scale of the disaster. Even local emergency teams struggled to coordinate, forced to rely on patchy satellite phones and shortwave radios. As the ash settled, a new crisis took hold. Fine volcanic dust blanketed every rooftop and field, seeping into rainwater tanks, the main source of drinking water for most households. With the water supply contaminated, people lined up for what little bottled water remained. Crops withered under the weight of ash and livestock fell sick. Health officials warned of respiratory problems, skin irritation, and the risk of waterborne disease. Communities were urged to take urgent precautions to protect clean water and to reduce health risks. Inside Tonga, the sense of isolation grew heavier by the hour. No one knew when help would arrive, or how much damage had spread across the scattered islands. The blackout left a nation waiting in the dark, while satellites and sensors thousands of kilometers away recorded every detail of the eruption's aftermath. In Tonga, the most basic questions, who was safe and who needed help, remained unanswered. Tide gauges across the Pacific began recording sharp, unexpected surges. In Santa Cruz, California, the harbor was transformed by waves up to 2 meters high. Boats broke free from their moorings, docks splintered, and damage estimates reached over $6 million. The harbor's calm was shattered by a force that had traveled more than 8,000 kilometers from its source. On the coast of Peru, the tsunami's reach became a matter of life and death. At Naylamp Beach, 2 women were swept away by powerful waves, victims of an event that began nearly 10,000 kilometers across the ocean. Fishing communities along the Peruvian and Chilean coasts faced flooding, ruined gear, and battered infrastructure. These were not isolated incidents. Tsunami signals appeared on tide charts from Japan to Chile, from Alaska to New Zealand. In the Caribbean, far from the Pacific, water levels rose suddenly, flooding streets and homes. Scientists traced these distant surges to the same eruption, but the timing did not fit traditional tsunami models. In many places, the first waves arrived earlier than expected, their patterns out of sync with the slow crawl of ocean swells. The question of how a single explosion could send waves to every corner of the planet began to puzzle researchers, hinting at a new kind of tsunami yet to be fully understood. Long before the ocean waves reached distant shores, barometers and tide gauges around the globe captured a silent messenger from Tonga. The eruption's pressure pulse, known as a lamb wave, raced outward through the atmosphere at nearly 320 meters per second, fast enough to circle the planet in just over 36 hours. As this invisible shockwave swept across the world's oceans, it pressed down on the sea surface, displacing water and setting off a new kind of tsunami, the meteo tsunami. In places like the Caribbean and the Mediterranean, the first sea level surges arrived hours before the classic tsunami waves, confounding scientists and emergency managers. Coupled atmosphere and ocean models later confirmed what the sensors recorded. When the speed of the atmospheric pulse matched the natural rhythm of an ocean basin, a phenomenon called Proudman resonance, the sea responded with amplified waves. This was not just a ripple, but a global ringing, triggered by air itself. For the first time, researchers watched a volcanic blast move both sky and sea in lockstep, rewriting the rules of tsunami science. Scientists around the world found themselves rethinking what they knew about volcanic eruptions and their impact on the planet. The Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai blast did more than send shockwaves and tsunamis. It injected an estimated 146 million tons of water vapor straight into the stratosphere, a surge never before recorded. This single event raised the global stratospheric water content by about 10%, a figure that left researchers stunned. Water vapor is a potent greenhouse gas, and its sudden arrival at such high altitudes is expected to influence global temperatures and weather patterns for years. At the same time, Tonga's economy faced staggering losses. Assessments by the Tongan government and the World Bank placed direct damages between 90 million and 118 million US dollars, nearly a fifth of the nation's annual economic output. The eruption forced a new understanding of how submarine volcanoes can alter both climate and the fate of vulnerable communities in a matter of hours. Today, scientists still analyze data from a blast powerful enough to ripple around the globe. As ocean and climate extremes grow, Tonga's eruption is a warning. The planet's forces remain unpredictable, and their reach is global. Nature does not need permission to redraw the map. Share your thoughts below.